So I picked up a used Concept 2 Model D rower that was in poor shape and fixed it up, and I now have a really nice rower on the cheap for like 10% of retail. I'll show you how I did this coming up. There may be an opportunity to score a deal at a CrossFit gym or box on some of their used rowers if they've broken the legs off of them. And this seems to be a common issue, and I assume it's particularly at CrossFit gyms because they like to stand these up on end in order to make space for their multi-use spaces. What happens though is that these aren't really designed to be stood up on end like that. It's a lot of weight that goes onto what turns out these are mainly aluminum. The legs are aluminum, the main body is aluminum, so there's a lot of weight that goes onto these aluminum pieces, and so eventually they fail, the legs bend, and they come off. So there could be an opportunity here to for you to go out and buy a nice, these are really nice rowers. They're well designed and well made, despite what I'm about to say, or despite what I just did say. There might be an opportunity for you here to get a hold of one of these nice rowers from a CrossFit gym that doesn't want to fix it themselves. They may have some lying around. They may be some older models. Like this one is over 10 years old. Also, I have a recommendation for Concept 2 itself. It might be worthwhile to make a CrossFit edition Concept 2 where instead of making these components out of aluminum, they're made out of steel. That way they could be stood up on end, which they're going to do anyways, except it'll be much more durable. Granted, it will be a heavier piece of equipment, but these guys are there to work out anyways. What do they care if it's heavier, right? Think about that. Now, this model I had in particular, not all the models are like this, but this model had these little sort of built-in, they're kind of fancy nuts. They're kind of these fancy sort of nuts that are pressed into the main frame or the main body of the rower. These nuts are meant to take the same screws that are used on the foot that you'll see later in this video, but these are stripped out. And so I could not use the stock screws to screw the legs back onto this main body. So I decided to tap out the existing nuts, just make the thread section larger, go to the hardware store and get a matching bolt that will fit into the newly enlarged nut area. So to do that, I used a thread tap. In this case, I used an M6 size thread tap. So on this machine, I rethreaded 2 of the 4 holes. One of the existing holes was not stripped out, and so I could use the stock screw for that. 2 of the holes were stripped out, and I needed to rethread those. And then one of the holes, or one of the threads, was completely missing the nut part altogether, and so I had to use, we'll call it custom nut and bolt combo to make that work. And so on that part, the one that's missing the nut altogether, the hole is much larger there, and it was also the part that was torn up the most. And so I had to go in and bend that back to flat. And so I just flattened that out a little bit with some pliers. So my thread tap was an M6 by 1.0 thread tap, and so I went to the store, found an M6 by 1.0 bolt of the correct length for this, and that worked beautifully. I also put some thread locker on all these bolts. Then I attached the two legs and tightened everything down. The front leg, which I had to buy, is part number 1173. And then I attached the foot to the bottom of the legs, part number 1925. And this foot uses the stock screws, which are part number 1253. So I just tightened all these bolts and screws and whatnot down until they were nice and snug. And then on this particular machine, I was also missing one of the nuts for the U-bolt on the handle, and that is part number 1235. I was also missing the plastic cap that covers the nut on the one side of the axle that holds on the fan. And that is part number 1010. And that simply just pops right on there. And now, for less than $50 in parts, I've got a working machine.